Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Syngenta Canada, Alberta Wheat Commission, and C&M Seeds.
I'm Kelvin Hepner with Real Agriculture, and welcome to another episode of the Wheat School, where we're going to focus on how wheat production here in Canada compares and ranks versus wheat production in other key producing areas of the world. And joining us, we're pleased to have Joerg Zimmermann of Global Ag Advisors, independent farm business advisor here in Manitoba, who works with farmers across Western Canada and around the world. And before we get to this information, this data, Joerg, can you fill us in on how you collected this data, these benchmarks basically of how wheat producers, farmers here on the prairies compare with their colleagues in other wheat growing areas?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Calvin. And so I am part of a group called the Agri Benchmark Network. And the Agri Benchmark Network basically is a worldwide group of advisors and university people and people like me on the ground that collect data from farms in their areas, in their specific areas, with a standardized procedure. So we have all the same procedure around the world to collect this data. So in the end, we do an apples to apples comparison of farms, of typical farms in the regions around the world.
In those, and for wheat in those key places like Russia, Ukraine, Australia.
Yeah, Russia, Ukraine, Argentina, Europe, obviously, North America, and South America as well.
Okay, so why don't we start then by looking at cost of production? Where do we rank here in Canada?
Yeah, so the cost of production in Canada, we are not the best. A lot of talk is about the Russians and the Ukrainians. So we are sort of in the middle area. So we're above the cost of production of the Ukrainians and the Russians, but we're lower than the European producers. And the European producers also very heavily rely on the subsidies in wheat. As we all know, wheat hasn't been the most profitable crop here in Canada over the last few years, probably with an exception of last year here in the Red River Valley. Where we are really good at in Canada is the operational costs. So we seem to have the same operational costs than the Russians. So in other words, we're using our equipment and we're using our people in a very efficient way. So these costs can be are very low. As an example, the average Russian worker gets about a $3 wage per hour, and our farm workers get about $25 an hour. But even with that difference, which you might think that the Russians have a competitive advantage, we can still manage to keep these operational costs under control and in the similar area. So that's really the good part of our production costs, which we could be proud of.
Okay, why don't we take a step back and look at yields? Where do Canadian wheat yields rank?
So Canadian wheat yields are sort of in the middle of the pack. We are definitely not as high yielding as the European countries, but we're right now. Actually, we're in a similar range than the Russians and the Ukrainians, and they have caught up on their yields over the last 20 years after the breakdown of the Soviet Union. So they are right there. Now, if we talk about yields, we should be probably also qualifying that a bit in Russia and Ukraine. That's often lower quality wheat than we have here in Canada, and it's mainly winter wheat. And the Russians and the Ukrainians, they're focusing on the Black Sea markets, the Mediterranean markets, where the customers usually don't focus that much on high quality. So, even though we have relatively high costs of production, and we know that the Russians and the Ukrainians are all exporting to North Africa and so on. It's probably that we don't really have to compete with them if it comes to quality. It maybe doesn't make sense to produce lower quality wheat here in Canada and ship it to Africa because we just don't have the transport cost advantage, and our land costs are higher and so on. So focusing on higher quality wheat, which can bring you a premium, is probably the way to go forward.
Okay, and that's what we've been hearing for years about Canadian wheat is
Yes.
we have this premium quality, and the benchmarking work that you've done bears evidence of the value of that.
Yeah. So again, I think that's where can we get the premium? I think in business it's probably not like in sports where there's only one winner. I think there's more than one winner in business. So we can focus on tendering to these markets. And actually, as an interesting story, I was giving a similar presentation in front of a few grain traders, and they said, "Oh yeah, I'm exporting to Mozambique as well, Africa." And he says that they use about 10% Canadian wheat and about 90% Russian or Black Sea wheat, and use the Canadian wheat to blend it up. So that's where we have to focus on.
You have some info here on Russian wheat export quality as well, and they're actually, it doesn't look like they're making any effort to boost the quality of that wheat.
No, I think they're using their location or their advantage of their location, low transport costs to the Black Sea markets or to the North African, Middle Eastern markets, and they're trying to cater to the needs of these countries, which are their bulk is lower quality wheat. And if I say lower quality, it's still baking quality, 11 to 13% protein. So they're definitely not focusing on the high protein wheat, which I think from a natural conditions point of view in Ukraine and this part of Russia, it's all winter wheat, and it's technically all lower quality winter wheat, I guess. Yeah.
So where do we go from here then, Joerg, in terms of the Canadian wheat industry? Maintain this focus on quality in our breeding programs, I guess, and if we can get higher yields along the way, that would be good too?
Yes, I mean, it has shown quite nicely last year in the Red River Valley, where we had a relatively dry year for us here, and the farmers were achieving good grain yields, mind you, a little bit lower quality too, but the numbers show that the profitability was pretty good. So I think we need to focus on breeding the wheat and getting better, higher yielding, good quality wheat, and that's what we can do here in Canada. We can do in crop fertilization. We can react fairly agile to these things because we are all family farms, and over in Russia these are often big structures where management decisions take a long time to hit the actual ground, and they need to go through a lot of hierarchical steps to get that executed. Whereas here, if a farmer makes a decision here in Canada in the morning that he wants to spray a foliar application, he is basically doing it in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
So
or in the evening when the temperatures are cooler.
Yes, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's where we can focus on everything that involves a lot of management. That is our long-term strategic advantage, because that's going to take a long time in Russia to materialize. It's not easy to manage these big farms.
All right. Well, thanks for painting a picture of where we fit in the world wheat trade, Joerg.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.